Welcome back. You're watching Crews of the Outfit. The Chinatown 26th Street Crew Part 3. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up this guy. Another Chinatown enforcer from back in the day was outfit lunatic Mario Dispenza. Dispenza was your stereotypical muscle who seemed to be a rising star in the outfit. He had a high propensity for violence and liked to wreak havoc on society. Like a lot of the guys, he started out as a juice loan collector and a strong arm for La Petra sometime in the 1960s. He quickly built a reputation for being a ruthless enforcer and was moving up fast. He eventually began putting his own money on the street and became a prominent loan shark in the crew. Unfortunately, his promising criminal career came to a screeching halt on a hot August day in 1971 while on what seemed to be an apparent routine arson job. Like a scene you'd expect to see out of a wild and violent movie, or possibly even a comedy, Dispenza was busy doing some gangster shit when things suddenly went terribly wrong and he met an early demise in a dramatic fashion. The 32-year-old Dispenza, along with his cousin, a disgraced Chicago detective who was fired after his superiors found out he was taking bribes, and then he decides to become a full-time gangster, Anthony Rocco, are tasked with burning down the Hut, a drive-in restaurant, and the pair ended up setting themselves ablaze. The two men were seen entering the restaurant carrying a length of rope and 2 gasoline containers. As they began to pour the gas into the containers on the stove, the pilot light ignited the fumes and caused the gas to explode, blowing up the bumbling arsonists in the process. Witnesses reported hearing the explosion and seeing the pair running from the building, yelling and screaming with their clothes on fire. Dispenza was found about a block from the scene, burnt to a crisp, and Rocco was found near the building. Both men were found alive with burns over 70% of their bodies. Rocco is believed to have enough sense to stop, drop, and roll, and that's probably why, despite being in extremely critical condition, he survived the ordeal. Dispenza, on the other hand, was not so lucky. He died the next day. Aldo Piscatelli is a Chinatown heavyweight that often flew under the radar. He was a low-key gangster and started off as a gopher and a collector that eventually became a leader within the crew. He ran the day-to-day operations of the crew's lucrative gambling rackets for more than a dozen years. He also supervised a collection of the crew's gambling debts, juice loans, and street tax payments. In 1987, the government obtained court authorization to bug the old neighborhood Italian-American club and the 26th Street Crew's headquarters, and the bug caught a conversation of Piscatelli's. A bookmaker owed the seasoned gangster $2,400 and Piscatelli wanted his money. "Now when the hell do I get it?" Piscatelli shouted during a 1988 telephone call intercepted by a government wiretap. I don't like to talk to you like this, but business is business." Piscatelli was a sharp guy and helped facilitate a lot of the gambling operations for the crew. Aldo orchestrated a lot of the logistics for the 26th Street Crew's underground casinos and backroom card games. Piscatelli also supervised bookmakers, recruited bettors, located wire rooms, and doled out juice loans. And interestingly, Piscatelli acted as a gopher for outfit bosses, picking up hundreds of thousands of dollars in payoffs from the Onlyong Chinese Merchants Association so it could run an illegal casino in Chinatown without mob interference. Even though the crew was heavy on juice loans, gambling accounted for a large chunk of their illicit revenue. The profits derived from illegal gambling and sports betting in the United States are so enormous that some people can't even wrap their head around it. The Illinois State Lottery Office conceded that $200 million is lost annually to criminal elements running illegal games. These figures stand at $5 billion nationally, and that doesn't take into account wagering on professional and amateur sports. Business has never been better for the minions of organized crime when you compare and contrast recent gambling stats to the published data from 30 years ago. Back then, the total income from rackets in America were considered to be in the neighborhood of $20 billion per year, with half of that revenue derived from illegal gambling. Recent statistics say that Americans wagered between $60 and $200 billion on football alone. The outfit is an illegal opportunity provider in this regard and will eagerly set up the necessary apparatus for bankers, car mechanics, and housewives to wager their hard-earned cash on their preferred game of chance. Race, color, creed, and national origin are of no consideration, and mob-controlled vice continues to flourish in metropolitan Chicago's diversified ethnic communities where residents throw around their money betting on games that happen to be indigenous to certain ethnic enclaves. Bookmaking on amateur and professional sports, particularly during the winter and fall seasons when football and basketball are at their peak, was and continues to be big business. The 26th Street crew, like the Cicero crew, maintain offices, rented apartments, and homes to facilitate gambling. A year-long survey conducted by the Associated Press revealed that wagering on NFL ranks #1 with both the social gambler who bets for the entertainment value of it and the compulsive gambler who simply can't help himself. Among men, 26% preferred NFL games, 15% chose college football as their choice for routine betting, while NBA, Major League Baseball, and college basketball garnered 13% of the market. Professional hockey trails the pack, attracting only 4% of the betting public. Gambling is indeed big business, and the outfit makes sure it receives a cut from bookmaking, video poker machines, which happens to proliferate hundreds of Chicago neighborhood taverns and social clubs, or policy games, the old numbers racket. Even with the existence of the state-run Illinois lottery, $200 million a year in revenue is still returned to organized crime from illegal policy games in Illinois. Nationally, the figure projects out to $5 billion from the numbers racket alone. And when a gambler runs out of money, the mob will provide a convenient line of credit, juice, vigorish, the VIG, or whatever you want to call it. These loans have extremely high interest rates. If a gambler falls behind in payments, which many do, he eventually loses his house, business, vehicles, or ends up working for the crew in some capacity. The alternative is lethal mob retribution. Being located in Chinatown gives the 26th Street crew an opportunity to cater to the Chinese betting market. And cater they did. In the heart of Chinatown, smack dab in the 22nd Street Chinatown community, the majestic terracotta design Anliang Merchant Building towers over the street. Years ago, Chinese immigrants found temporary lodging here and were assisted with their settlement in America by the Anliang organization, a Tong gang that slowly evolved into a fraternalistic body deeply rooted in customs of imperial China. I'd compare it to a Chinese version of the Union Siciliana. It's pretty much the Chinese equivalent. The Anliang organization had good intentions early on helping out Chinese immigrants, but were eventually corrupted by Chinese gangsters. Sound familiar? If you know the history of the Union Siciliana, it will. More recently, the upper floors of this historic building were transformed into a gambling casino, sponsoring Fan Tan, Bung Lu, and other games that appealed to the Chinese residents of the community. Please forgive my pronunciation if I ain't saying these right. Turns out these Asian gangsters know what they're doing. The operation pulled in more than $11.5 million in revenue. When the outfit caught a whiff of that, they weren't having it. They don't care about nationality. Gambling don't see any other color but green. 26th Street crew enforcers paid the place a visit and apparently told them they needed to pay a ridiculous number for their monthly street tax. A proposed arrangement layered with threats of violence. Chinese leaders from the Chicago branch of the Anliang organization took their concerns to Yu Lip Moy, the Anliang national president based out of Pittsburgh. He interceded with his mob contacts in Pittsburgh and asked for help in dealing with their Chicago counterparts. And this went all the way up to Pittsburgh mob boss John LaRocca. And then Pittsburgh mob leaders contacted Chicago mobsters to hammer out a deal. Interestingly, top-tier outfit hitman Frank the German Schweiz knows a few Pittsburgh wise guys and was used as an outfit liaison when dealing with Pittsburgh. Eventually, a deal was struck between LaPetra and LaRocca through Schweiz, and that was a 75-25 split of the protection money that Chinese gamblers were to pay the Italians. So, outfit bosses agreed to let the casino operate in return for monthly street tax payments of $12,000 from Anliang members. According to court testimony, the 26th Street crew passed on $4,000 of the $12K monthly payoff to Pittsburgh mobsters. For almost 4 years, Piscatelli picked up the money and passed it along to his adopted father, Joseph Shorty Lamantia. The whole operation was eventually taken down by the feds in the mid-80s. The outfit wanted to keep the revenue stream going, and these Chinamen need a place to go to gamble. Well, fear not, Johnny No-Nose DeFranzo to the rescue. The outfit was seemingly unfazed by the padlocking of the Anliang building. Under the direction of John DeFranzo, boss of the Elmwood Park crew, plans were undertaken in the fall of '89 to set up poker, blackjack games, and a sports book for Asian gamblers in a private club setting in the suburbs. So as you can see, even though the 26th Street crew is very well known for its massive juice loan rackets and slaughtering people the bosses put on the chopping block, they also made a boatload of cash with their gambling operations. In fact, every outfit crew makes a killing from gambling, which also means every crew has some kind of gambling wing that operates those type of rackets. Some of the Chinatown 26th Street crew's top gambling racketeers and bookies were Gino Blackie Martin, The Bistone brothers, Sal Bistone and Carmen Bistone. William D. Domenico. The DeCaro brothers, Charlie Specs and Joe Spider. Dominic DeFazio, aka Captain D. Richie the Cat Catazone. The Pacella brothers, Joe Popeye and his younger brother Billy. Johnny the Bookie Manzella. This guy handed out a lot of juice loans as well. Sam Concho. Tony Pineapples Eldorado. John Credito. Angelo Gypsy Volpe. Sam Bills. Vince Floriano. And Mike Tallarico, aka Nephew, aka Handsome Mike. They call him Nephew because he's Angelo LaPietra's nephew. And interestingly, Tallarico married Nora Schweiz, the daughter of seasoned outfit hitman Frank the German Schweiz. And she was also on that reality show Mob Wives. Aldo Piscatelli was instrumental in running the 26th Street Crew's gambling operations. He seamlessly stepped in and took over for his pop, Shorty LaMantia, when he went on to do bigger and better things for the crew. Joseph Shorty LaMantia is a longtime lieutenant and top aide to Angelo LaPietra. LaMantia built his reputation early on as a skilled burglar and thief. Shorty was known as a good heist man as well as a good wheelman. Shorty would eventually be taken into the Chinatown crew by the LaPietra brothers and steered toward the juice loan rackets. Shorty would tinker with the unions and run various gambling rackets as well. He would also supervise the exploits of the robbery guys within the crew. LaMantia seemed to be well liked by his outfit cohorts. Shorty would eventually become one of the top racketeers in the crew. Shorty also functioned as sort of a fixer for the crew. He got really good at greasing law enforcement and politicians. He was also the crew's liaison to City Hall in the 90s. LaMantia's biggest claim to fame would have to be his success in fixing his son's murder case. One of the main sources of strife for Shorty that caused him a lot of sleepless nights was his troublesome hoodlum of a son. Rocco LaMantia, a multiple convicted felon, has graced the front page news more than once. Rocco came out the gate swinging. The first major headache he caused for his father was a biggie. How big, you might ask? About as big as they get. First degree murder big. On May 6, 1979, Rocco's girl, his high school sweetheart Martha DeCaro, came to see him at the LaMantia family home on the south side of Chicago in order to end their 5-year relationship. Well, apparently Rocco didn't agree with her vision for the future of their relationship because he freaked out. A highly aggressive argument ensued and an enraged LaMantia stormed into another room and grabbed Daddy's gun, walked right up to her and shot her in the face. Argument over. Wow, talk about impulse control. Shooting your girlfriend in the head in the heat of an argument in your living room with your dad's gun doesn't give you much breathing room in court. Oh yeah, turns out he didn't need it. I'm sure Shorty was furious over this, obviously. As much as he wanted to beat his kid's ass, even more he didn't want his son to rot away in a prison cell. Oftentimes I hear people ask, why do guys even get into life? It always ends the same way, debt or prison. Fair question. Well, besides the obvious income perks, because your earning potential has no ceiling, they get a sort of underworld power. A power foreign to you and I because it only comes with joining that life. And it's a power they can oftentimes apply to a detrimental real world situation like this and make the impossible possible. And within that power is the nervous system, an extensive network of connections. Because once you join the life, your connections become his connections and his connections become your connections. And so on and so forth. Everyone gets everyone's connections. And on we go. Probably the single greatest thing about joining an organization. Because what makes these crazy things happen are connections. Because it's the right connections that will always provide you with a roadmap for where you're trying to go. So whatever it is that you want to accomplish, there's always someone somewhere in the position to do it. So the main question is, are those right connections within your scope of influence? And when you're in the mafia, that scope is magnified 100-fold. It gives well-connected mobsters sort of a superpower. That power sometimes makes that life worth living. Because there's something so satisfying about being able to do things that you're not supposed to be able to do, things that seem impossible, things other people got no hope of doing. And this is the type of thing that you could get accomplished when you have the full force of the mob behind you. Normally, if you find yourself in a position like this, your goose is cooked. Rocco foolishly put himself in a position so dire, it should have been game over for him. But nah, Shorty like, step aside son, I got this. He went into his bag of tricks and sprinkled some of that mob magic on the situation. Because one of the perks of being a prominent Chicago mobster is their inept ability to fix cases, murder cases in particular. Which brings me back to that original question, why do these guys do it, if that road only leads to a prison cell or bullet? Because the power they receive that stems from the Chicago mob membership enables them to pull off stuff like this, fix his son's capital murder case. When the deck was seemingly stacked against him, with a mountain of evidence and the death penalty or life sentence staring his kid in the face, against all odds, Shorty was able to make the impossible possible. The 26th Street Crew sprang into action. The hook signaled to the bullpen and called for political specialist Pat Marcy. As I mentioned in part 1, in those days, Marcy wielded unprecedented power in City Hall in Chicago's powerful First Ward. Marcy was able to do his thing and shuffle some things around and get this guy, notoriously corrupt Cook County Judge Thomas Maloney, to provide over the La Mantilla murder case. Operating in the shadows like a proper mob fixer, Marcy got it handled, just like he had time and time again. Pat Marcy came back to Shorty and told him he could secure an acquittal for 20 grand. La Mantilla had plenty of money and probably prepared to pay even more, happily forked over the 20K Marcy said they needed, and they did it. With relative ease, they managed to successfully fix the case. So despite all the hard evidence and the obvious circumstances of the case, all it took is a lump sum payment and Rocco is acquitted of the cold-blooded murder of his former girlfriend. Eventually, the embarrassment stemming from the brazen and widespread corruption became too much to bear for the few honest court officials and politicians still operating in the First Ward. They knew they were no match against it, so they appealed to the FBI for help. And of course, they were happy to oblige. The subsequent investigation triggered would become known as Operation Greylord, and boy was it a doozy. The operation would go down as one of the most important cases in the annals of public corruption investigations in the United States. A lot of heads went rolling. The FBI was able to amputate a massive legion of perpetual corruption that was permeating throughout the political landscape in Chicago for many years. The legal fallout was unprecedented. 93 individuals were indicted, including 17 judges, 48 lawyers, 10 deputy sheriffs, and several other law enforcement officers. Also snared in the sweeping indictment was mob-friendly corrupt judge Tom Maloney. Maloney would pay dearly for his years of indiscretions. He was leveled with a 16-year sentence for accepting over $100,000 worth of bribes and fixing at least 3 murder cases. Rocco also took a pretty big pinch when he was the wheelman of a 5-man robbery crew that hit up a pawn shop in October 2007. Witnesses say around lunchtime, 4 men walked into a pawn shop on West Roosevelt Road and began smashing display cases with hatchets. They also used the tools to hold off employees and customers and escaped with $175,000 in new diamond rings and gold chains. I'm telling you, this dude can't be too bright because they seemingly got away clean with the loot, but for some reason, Rocco returned to the shop after the armed robbery, supposedly to check on the victims. Say what? Rocky LaMantia had been a customer of the shop for like 6 or 7 years. Apparently, when he returned to the scene, witnesses were like, "There goes the driver right there." He was subsequently arrested by police on the spot, and of course only the best lawyers for old Rocky. Just like New York, Chicago has their favorite lawyers they like to use, and eventually the press calls him a mob lawyer. LaMantia's lawyer was probably the closest thing Chicago had to a Roy Cohen or a Bruce Culler. His name is Joe Lopez and is known as the Shark. Wait a second, kinda looks like a Mexican Bruce Culler. This is what he said to reporters.
In the pawn shop heist, Rocky is being railroaded. My client was there to redeem some of the goods that were previously given to the shop owner. While he was there, those other individuals came in and violently attacked the patrons that were there. They violently smashed the cabinets and, from my understanding, took jewelry out of there and ordered my client onto the ground. My client was a victim.
That all sounds great, but the only problem with that was several eyewitnesses were saying, "Nah, dude, that guy drove." As you can probably guess, the jury believed the eyewitnesses over Lopez, and in 2008, LaMantia was convicted of armed robbery and handed a 6-piece in prison. So he can add that to a rap sheet that already includes arrests for drugs, burglaries, and weapons violations. The LaMantia name surfaced in 1999 when old Rocco reportedly got in on a good old racketeering free-for-all. There was this little stretch of time when the Chinatown crew had a real sweet racket going that was paying out big, and it seemed anybody who's anybody in the Chicago underworld was getting in on it. In 1992, Chicago came out with a program which allowed the city to lease trucks from the private sector to do city jobs, called the Hire Truck Program. Private companies were paid tens of millions of taxpayer dollars by the city to haul dirt and asphalt for snow removal, construction, and other infrastructure-related tasks. And boy, was this program ripe for mob exploitation. The outfit saw an opportunity and took full advantage, like they always do. The outfit's point man for this little money-making endeavor was Chinatown bookie Nick the Stick Lococo, who kinda had the opportunity fall in his lap. He would earn the moniker Nick the Stick because he carried a hard wooden rod around with him everywhere and used it to lay a beating on guys in an attempt to collect debts. Lococo grew up in Bridgeport and in the same neighborhood as the Daley family, and Nick became good friends with Richard Jr., the future Chicago mayor. Mayor Daley wasn't known for his upstanding morals and integrity, and you know what they say, birds of a feather. We'll just say it wasn't a surprise that Daley was friendly with Chicago's more shady characters. On top of working for the mayor, Lococo was a longtime thriving outfit bookmaker and a big earner for the Chinatown 26th Street crew. He was arrested in 1986 while in his government position on a gambling charge. Oh, surprise, surprise, it was later thrown out. At some point, Daley took Lococo in and gave him a position within his administration, making Nick the only outfit gangster to serve in the administration of a sitting mayor, as far as I know. Then, if Nick thought things couldn't get any better, they most certainly did. Nick received what they call an underworld blessing. Mayor Daley thought it was a good idea to put his old buddy Nick the Stick in charge of the city's hired truck program. That's like putting a fat kid in charge of a candy store. By doing this, Daley put the mob in charge of the program that assigns the city's trucking contracts, along with its $40 million budget, enabling them to scam the system for millions. And scam they did. The outfit never squanders an opportunity. The city might as well have just handed the mob their checkbook. From 1997 to 2002, Lococo was the man. He had full control over the city's trucking contracts. He decided which company gets what contract. It was like getting the golden ticket to the chocolate factory. Nick was the gatekeeper to mob riches, and he was sure to take advantage of this advantageous position he found himself in. He immediately made the city's outsourcing of hauling contracts into a corrupt pay-to-play basis. Because these sweet prime trucking contracts aren't free, baby. Large bribes would be doled out by these companies in order to acquire said contracts. And then these companies were paid boatloads of money to haul loads for the city. But they often did next to nothing at all. Their trucks would sit and sit for hours. And once Nick was put in charge, new trucking firms were popping up left and right. A number of these trucking firms hired were run by Daley's pals from Bridgeport, Nick's mob associates, and various guys associated with the 26th Street crew and or various family members of the aforementioned. The owner of one of these new trucking companies that popped up was our boy Rocco. By the time Nick really had this racket humming, Rocco wanted in on some of that easy mob money. Then in 1999, Rocco LaMantia helped set up Dialects Trucking. You'll love this. With only 2 trucks, his company made an estimated $420,000 a year with the hired truck program until 2002. By year 5, his company cleared $1 million in city contracts. And Lococo wasn't the mayor's only outfit buddy. He's also good friends with trucking magnate and 26th Street crew member Fred Barbara. Fred was a smart and savvy career criminal hybrid who was able to operate in both the legitimate and illegitimate world simultaneously at a very high level. Despite being arrested 5 times, he has never been convicted of a crime. He did have a couple close calls. There was that time he was busted trying to collect a juice loan payment from an undercover FBI agent. He and his co-defendants took it to trial and they were all acquitted. Fred was enjoying the perks of a squeaky clean reputation and a clean police record, but that would all change when Nick put him on blast at the Family Secrets trial, telling the court that Barbara was part of a 3-man arson team who went out and bombed Horwath's Restaurant, a well-known mob hangout in Elmwood Park. And as we all know, public opinion is everything, and Fred's reputation took a hit after that. Nevertheless, Fred Barbara was killing it at life. Barbara owned and operated Fred Barbara Trucking, a trucking conglomerate that includes several sub-companies. He had 3 large truck hauling firms and other solid waste disposal companies, which included Shred All Recycling Systems and a landfill company. Daley would simply hand over all the city's waste management contracts to Barbara. Well, proof's in the pudding. The largest customer for Barbara was the city of Chicago. They delivered 50% of its daily tonnage to his landfill at $30 a ton. All of Barbara's trucking companies collectively generated an annual revenue of approximately $36 million. Outfit guys putting trucking companies in their relatives' names became a common practice during that time, because he also had his wife, father, and mother-in-law in the hired truck program. He had a company called Karen's Cartage in his wife Lisa's name. In 2002, it cleared $520,000. His old man had one truck and managed to clear 50 grand for about an 8-month span. Even his mother-in-law, Geraldine Hubert, hired out one truck and one driver to the city and made $38,720 in 10 months. Even the Pasella brothers opened their own trucking company so they could get in on this government cash grab. The Pasella brothers were major outfit sleepers. They operated so far under the radar most people don't know who they are. Popeye was considered one of the founding fathers of the new Chinatown power base. He was a powerful dude and had a lot of connections. He got his button under Angelo and was a heavy earner for him. He was close to Shorty, Johnny Apes, and most of the upper crust of the outfit. His younger brother Billy was allegedly made under Tootsie Babe. Since then, his power was steadily on the rise, and Billy's considered a current crew heavyweight in Toots Caruso's regime. They started Pasella Trucking. I'm sure they put a lot of thought into the name. They were fed a lot of contracts, and their company cleared $1 million when everything was said and done. Even guys with a criminal record and a little creativity were getting in on this money train. Michael the Gorilla Gargone was a career thief, burglar, and heist man who specialized in safe cracking. Gargone drove a truck for streets and sanitation while moonlighting as a top-notch safecracker for the 26th Street crew for many years, according to authorities. He was actually the founding member of the Old Neighborhood Italian-American Social Club and served as their sergeant-at-arms for over 30 years. Gargone has a history of arrests, but only one significant conviction holding him back from owning his own trucking company. And that was for a botched $600,000 heist at Balmoral Racetrack in 1983. Gargone and another man were sitting inside a vehicle keeping a lookout for the cops, while their counterparts were inside subduing the security guards. Everything was going swimmingly until a fresh shift of security guards arrived, and that put a hamper on the heist and the burglars fled. How do you not know the shifts for the guards on a $600,000 heist? Amateur hour for sure. Shorty supervised the crew, and I'm sure he was frustrated and disappointed. This is not what you'll come to expect from a seasoned outfit robbery crew. He didn't take the pinch until years later though, when two guys from his robbery crew, Duke Basile and Paul Peanuts Pansko, flipped and gave him up. A move that surprised the outfit. Pansko was a highly skilled career burglar and heist man and was considered one of, if not the best thief in Chicago, perhaps even the entire country. There's actually a few of these Pansko fellas running around Chicago breaking into houses. There's 5 of them total, all thieves and career criminals, but 2 of them stand head and shoulders above the rest, and that's Paul and Ed, who goes by Butch. They're considered top of the line as far as residential burglary goes. Bosses didn't expect him to flip because Peanuts has taken several pinches before and served a few prison stretches without ratting. I guess he just wasn't feeling it this time. Gargone kept his mouth shut and got 7 years for the botched robbery, the first time he was convicted. The judge actually admitted to hammering him because Gargone had spent most of his life as a burglar and gotten away with it. And that's bullshit. There should be no way that's legal. Gargone used his brother-in-law Carmen Schatz Gargone and opened Schatz Trucking. Records show the city paid Schatz Inc. $396,562 for the first 10 months in the program in 2003. Andritz Trucking is owned by Donald Andriacchi, the nephew of Joe the Builder Andriacchi. The city has done business with Andritz Trucking for decades. A lot of mob guys were putting trucking companies in women's names too. There's a reason for that. The city gives out lucrative grants and various preferential treatment to female business owners. Let's be a little more realistic here. There we go. I pride myself on my accuracy, guys. Female truckers don't look like that. So the outfit was sure to exploit that as well. For example, Grand Avenue heavyweight Chris Spina put Chica Trucking in his sister-in-law Patricia Cortez's name. Spina was the former driver for crew captain Joey the Clown Lombardo, and he actually got fired from his city job because he was caught driving around Lombardo on city time. I already mentioned that Barbara put a company in his wife and his mother-in-law's name. Michael Gargone used a female as well. Michael got a relative of his, Rhonda Vesquez Gargone, a dispatcher job at Schatz Trucking. Next thing you know, a trucking company popped up in her name as well. Officials were quoted saying that the growth of her business has been remarkable. The company made about $3 grand the first year in 2001, and then $538,949 the following year. No foul play there. Even Cicero guys were getting in on the fun. Outfit hitman and loan shark out of the Cicero crew, Jimmy Inendino, seemed to have his hands in all kinds of things, and he was making a killing with his company JMS Trucking. Interestingly, his trucking firm was approved for the program in a mere 7 months after he was convicted of ripping off the town of Cicero in an elaborate kickback scheme. Inendino's buddy and convicted bookmaker Craig Paloian, also in the Cicero crew, found refuge in the hired truck program with his firm Rough Edge Inc. Paloian ran a small trucking company out of his home in Elmwood Park. And the money came at a good time for Poloian. He was indicted in January of '01 on bookmaking charges. That same year, the city began hiring trucks from him. In that year, the city paid Poloian about $182,800. Go on, get you a lawyer, son. In addition to paying bribes for favorite treatment, hired truck contractors oftentimes were generous in their campaign contributions to the mayor and his cronies. Between 1996 and 2004, companies in the hired truck program gave more than $800,000 in campaign contributions to Mayor Daley and his allies. As a general foreman for the city's transportation department, Lococo wasn't allowed to have an ownership stake in any company contracting with the program. Hey, but Nick the Stick wasn't going to let some silly rule stop him from exploiting his position for maximum illicit monetary gain. Nick simply used a middleman who worked out an arrangement with an owner of another trucking firm in the program who would disguise Nick's trucks as one of his and funnel related hired truck proceeds back to Nick. In return, that guy's company would get a bigger serving of his own from the same gravy train, which of course Nick would arrange. Neat and clean, labor racketeering at its finest. The corruption got so widespread and out of hand, guys started getting sloppy and careless. Normally, if a truck was supposed to be out on a job, they tried to hide it or at the very least tuck it in a spot out of the way, but they got lazier and lazier over time and eventually they stopped doing that. Their attitude was like, fuck it, no one cares. Well, apparently some do. Chicago reporter Tim Novak of the Sun-Times kept seeing the same big red dump truck parked down the street from his house, seemingly never moving. He thought that was kind of strange, so he started paying more attention and noticed other work trucks parked for long periods of time. Well, then one day out of curiosity, he walked up to the red dump truck and noticed a big sticker that said that truck was leased to the City of Chicago's hired truck program. Then he thought to himself, what kind of city program involves parking trucks on the side of the road for 8 hours of the day? Then he started to do a little digging. Novak then staked out a city water crew for 5 days, watching 4 hired trucks sit idly during each 8-hour shift. Of course, Novak's over there crunching numbers and eventually figures out that each truck costs taxpayers $50.17 an hour. His investigation resulted in the whistleblowing expose Clout on Wheels, a 3-part series released by the Sun-Times in January of '04. The domino effect was underway as the press of the scandal eventually sparked a federal investigation. In all, 49 people were charged in the case, 33 of them city employees, with Lococo being the ringleader. Then this story takes a bizarre left turn. You see, Nick liked to ride horses. That was kind of his thing. Shortly after being indicted in connection with the hired truck scandal, Nick the Stick was out riding in a big field located in the southwest of Chicago in Monee. Everything seemed to be going well until suddenly his horse took off in a hard gallop and then suddenly hit the brakes and stopped. Nick was thrown off from the saddle and violently hit the ground. Badly injured, Nick was taken to the hospital and then died shortly thereafter from the ordeal. Authorities would rule it an accident after a quick investigation. Many others close to the situation think otherwise. People were like, yeah right, we've seen this all before. He dies right after he's indicted? Come on. And Nick was in a position where he could have put a lot of people away. And folks were vocal about it. As one reporter was quoted saying, "Mr. Lococo has a pending indictment and possibly another one on its way, and then this happens?" Many people don't believe coincidences exist within the Mafia. To them, the official report is a bit far-fetched. Most people share in the theory that Lococo's death was no accident. One investigator tried to put it in perspective when he posed the question that, "On a Sunday, with NFL games underway and money on the line, a bookie goes for a horseback ride and dies? Isn't that odd to anybody else?" The Chinatown crew will come full circle after the death of Johnny Apes. The prodigal son, a man filled to the brim with mafia pedigree, ascends to the throne. The grandson of OG Captain and the man who started it all in Chinatown, Bruno the Bomber Rohde. He's the nephew of the outfit's political weasel who's burrowed himself deep within Chicago's political arena, Fred Rohde, and the son of former knockaround guy and gambling extraordinaire, Frank Skids Caruso. Of course, I'm talking about Frank Toots Caruso. He would take the reins of the crew. Frank literally grew up in the Mafia. He was groomed and well acclimated by the time it was his turn to run things. Not to mention Caruso had a hell of a business acumen, so he thrived as a racketeer. He was a natural. But he should be, he was practically bred for it. Once Toots took the reins of the Chinatown 26th Street crew, he really went heavy into the unions and labor racketeering. Toots Caruso would ride that fine line of respectability during his reign by holding down some significant union-related titles, as did a few of his relatives. As we already know with the Carusos, they have a massive family. So he had a really good support system around him, more specifically his brother Bruno and his cousin Leo. And like Frank, Bruno and Leo were made members in the Chinatown crew and heavily involved in the unions. Early on in his criminal career, his pop used him as a gopher or go-between. He'd be sent to pick up or drop off messages or envelopes full of money. He got to know a lot of the major players in the outfit, which set him on the path to be a career criminal destined for a prominent position within the organization, and allowed him to forge relationships with other Chicago wise guys on the come up from other crews, which would set the stage for prosperous inter-crew schemes and operations in the future. Frank would get his mob career cooking early on with his standard entry-level crimes such as burglaries, robberies, and truck hijackings. Later, he would start running various gambling rackets, bookmaking, loan sharking, and was involved in the chop shop rackets. He would then step up his game and crank up the crew's union activity. Toots Caruso, Bruno, and a few other outfit members had infiltrated the labor unions in Chicago and its district council that controlled the billion-dollar union pension fund, according to testimony at federally monitored union hearings. Considering Frank's status amongst his outfit peers, he shot up through the union ranks real quick. He held the title of President and Business Manager of Local 1006, Sergeant at Arms for the Chicago District Council, and Director of the Chicago District Council's affiliated pension fund. There they go again, putting the mob in charge of money. Like Frank, Bruno Caruso was very prominent in the unions as well, maybe even more so. Bruno Caruso definitely found his groove with labor racketeering and eventually became one of the most powerful labor bosses in Chicago. But like many others, his journey was also rooted in humble beginnings. He started out cutting hair in the 1960s, and while he was doing that, he'd be drumming up votes for the Democrats in the First Ward, the mob's historical political power base. "You know, I gave outstanding haircuts," Caruso boasted in a 1997 deposition, but this son of a Chinatown mob boss soon traded in his scissors for a jackhammer. Caruso went to work for the city in 1966 as an asphalt laborer. Within his first year on the job, he became a steward for Laborers Local 1001. And once he got his foot in the door, sky was the limit. Caruso moved from foreman to supervisor to superintendent of pavement repair. Caruso increased his prominence within the community when he married Marianne Rizza, whose family owns 5 car dealerships. The move also injected some much-needed legitimacy into his image. While he was a Department of Streets and Sanitation superintendent, he also joined the Executive Board of Laborers Local 1001 in 1981. And then a year later, Caruso was made the union secretary-treasurer, which was a full-time job, so Caruso left his city job. And Bruno rose all the way to the top position of president and business manager of Local 1001. He was also a delegate to the Construction and General Laborers District Council of Chicago before he became the president and business manager of Chicago District Council. He was also a trustee of the CDC's affiliated Welfare Fund and a chairman of the CDC's affiliated Political Action League. The man was pretty busy. Cousin Leo began his criminal journey on the more grimy side of organized crime. He dwelled more on the street level side of things and operated various gambling rackets. He ran illegal dice games for the crew in the late 60s and operated a sports book in the 70s. Leo also held a no-show street sweeper job with the city of Chicago. Then at some point, word got out that these connected guys weren't doing any work. Then in 1991, he resigned as a result of an investigation of city workers who were not on duty during working hours. After that, Leo was looking at what Frank and Bruno were doing and decided to join them and pivoted into labor racketeering. And he started as a delegate to the Chicago District Council, and shortly after he was moved up to the position of Sergeant at Arms. He then became an executive board member and secretary-treasurer of Local 1006 before he too was president and then business manager of Local 1006. And Leo was also the trustee to the CDC's affiliated pension fund. So as you can see, them Caruso boys didn't just infiltrate the unions, they hijacked them and took them over. During their run controlling the unions, each one of them held a prominent position somewhere at any given time. But of course, life is not without its distractions. Reminiscent of what happened to Shorty Lamantia and his son back in '79, Frank and his son Frank Jr. went through a similar experience. It wasn't a murder case, it was attempted murder, but what made this one different, and some might say worse, is it was a hate crime, the racial kind. And with this one, Frank Jr. wasn't acquitted, but he did get off with only a slap on the wrist. That Mafia magic was definitely at work here. Alright, so let me set the stage for you. In these big cities with a highly diverse population, there's oftentimes a lot of racial tension in those streets. It was sure permeating around Bridgeport and its neighboring town of Bronzeville, community separated physically by a 12-lane Dan Ryan expressway and physiologically by a broad racial divide. Bronzeville is largely poor, the remnant of a once thriving neighborhood ravaged by drugs, gangs, and despair. And Bridgeport, on the other hand, is a gritty, blue-collar, middle-class community of Italian, Irish, and Polish descendants. The racial tension between the neighborhoods goes back generations. In March of 1997, a 13-year-old boy named Leonard Clark and two of his buddies were going to take a bike ride when Leonard noticed his tire was almost flat and he needed to put some air in it. The place in their neighborhood charged $0.25 for air, and of course these kids are poor, they ain't got no quarter. But they knew that there was a place that they could get air for free one town over in Bridgeport. So the three youngsters crossed the expressway into Bridgeport, and after getting air they hung around for a while and played basketball with some other kids they knew, and apparently they stuck around too long because they eventually caught the attention of a couple older Italian kids, specifically Frankie Calabrese and his two buddies, Michael Wadinsky and Victor Jesus. A witness later told investigators that Frankie said, "I'm gonna beat the shit out of them. They shouldn't be in this neighborhood." Then Crusoe and his two buddies took off and chased after him. Clark's friends managed to pedal away and escape, but Clark wouldn't be so lucky. Crusoe caught up to him and knocked him off his bike. Then the attackers chased the crying Clark into an alley where they slammed his head against the wall and the three proceeded to kick and pummel him. They beat him mercilessly and left him for dead. Clark was a bloody mess, laying there in a coma simply because he was black in their neighborhood. Leonard Clark would survive the ordeal, and Frankie and his buddies would get busted for the brazen beating and were facing charges of attempted murder and committing a hate crime, and they planned to take it to trial. Several eyewitnesses apparently told the police that the three Italian boys were all bragging about the beating, and the press found out. One reporter stated, "A group of teenagers is charged with beating a black boy to a pulp and then boasting that they kept their neighborhood white." Frank Sr. knew from the beginning that this being a racial issue could go very bad for them, and he needed to control the narrative. And he didn't waste any time, using all that mafia influence he's built up over the years to change public perception of the incident. Even before his son went to trial, Frank Sr. started showing up for the black community. He's volunteering at housing projects, praying at black churches, even arranging photo ops so his son can be seen hanging out with black kids. And he started calling for healing. The only problem for the Crusoes was that there was 3 people who saw the attack that left Clark in a coma for 2 weeks and caused brain injuries. One of the witnesses was also the son of a 26th Street crew member. His name is Richard DeSantis Jr., the son of Richard DeSantis Sr., aka Mousy. He actually made a statement to police and then vanished. He completely disappeared before the trial started. Meanwhile, the prosecution's second witness, Michael Cutler, went out with some friends on May 15th and shortly after midnight pulled up to the curb in Chicago's west side to drop him off. As they left the car, 2 men walked up to the car and approached Cutler and announced a robbery. "And this is a robbery, she?" They went straight to squeezing triggers and shot him in the head, killing him. Now, police said the slaying appears unrelated to the beating. Others, including the judge, prosecutors, and the Cook County State's attorney, didn't believe that for a second, noting that the gunman didn't rob Cutler's friends and only took one item. One of them pulled a relatively inexpensive class ring from his finger, a traditional way mob hitmen prove they've gotten their target. Plus, a witness in a mob case getting gunned down right before he's scheduled to testify in a trial that's about to start is usually not a coincidence or unrelated. A third witness gave police a detailed account of the attack, but suddenly got a case of amnesia. Imagine that. He told the jury more than 125 times that he forgot what happened. It was a total shit show for the prosecution. A mob informant told the FBI there was a contract out on the judge's life, so he was subsequently put under 24-hour guard. With the prosecution's case teetering, Toots Caruso turned up the heat. The Caruso family mounted a huge public relations campaign. Frank Sr. preached racial tolerance on local cable TV programs. He and his wife Sherry began attending black churches and making appearances with African American ministers, most notably the influential Reverend Herbert B. Martin, who was an advisor to the late Chicago Mayor Harold Washington and former director of the South Side branch of the NAACP. Interestingly, Chicago Magazine published a story headlined "Frankie and ZZ," detailing a budding friendship between Frankie Calabrese, who was out on bond, and Martin's teenage daughter. Against all odds and with the help from the black community, Frank Sr. was successfully able to cultivate a non-threatening, wholesome public image for his son. What Frank was able to do is nothing short of impressive. The racial divide in this particular area was so prominent, the government could barely ever move the needle, but with his kid's freedom on the line, Toots Caruso cracked open a little bit of that mob magic he's been saving and was able to sway a huge portion of the population in very little time. Not only that, he was able to somehow get prominent black folks to kinda almost turn on their own race and publicly side with the Caruso family. Several folks in the black community were stunned when they heard those people speak on the news. And given the gravity of the situation, white people were shocked too. Actually, I think confused might be a better word to use here, because what they're witnessing happening seemed like an impossible concept. But little did anyone know that mob magic was in the air doing its thing. This situation gives us a glimpse of the effect the outfit's power and influence can have on a community. Shit was crazy, it was chaos. People are questioning the police and black folks are questioning each other. Like parting the Red Sea, outfit tactics were able to divide the black community in Bronzeville. Some Bronzeville residents were incensed that prominent African Americans were even socializing with the Carusos, let alone taking their side, and accused Reverend Martin and other black leaders of taking mafia payoffs and being race traders. And I'm sure there was money being exchanged somewhere. And obviously the situation garnered a lot of press, which turned the trial into a circus. Nevertheless, the trial began and Frankie Caruso was ultimately convicted in the beating, but was found not guilty of the attempted murder charge, which was the centerpiece of the prosecution's case and the biggest charge he was facing. He did get convicted of aggravated battery. Frankie was handed an 8-year sentence, but ended up only serving 2 years. A sentence that was probably all worked out beforehand. An all-out acquittal may have triggered a riot, so this is probably the next best thing. One can't help but appreciate the efforts Frank Sr. made to help his son out of this crazy situation he got himself in. Unleashing that mafia magic will sometimes only take you so far, and you have to apply some action and effort with it to get the desired effect. But at the end of the day, let's call it what it is. Another example of a spoiled mafia prodigy rich kid who thinks he's above the law because of who his daddy is. Interestingly, after the trial was over, approximately 7 months after he disappeared, Mousie's kid showed back up. He just popped up out of nowhere and turned himself in. His attorney, James Catroni, would only say that he'd been coerced by police to implicate his friends. It's pretty clear what happened to DeSantis. After it came out his kid was talking to investigators, Mousie yanked him off the board and out of reach of investigators. Now, I don't know if this kid was just real young or slow or on the spectrum or what his deal is, but he couldn't be trusted on the streets. Mousie had to get him out of there before he got himself killed. I tell you what, he's lucky that this didn't happen back when Angelo was running things. Angelo would have whacked his kid without giving it a second thought. Tootsie's a little more civilized. He was probably like, get your kid the hell out of here. He needs to disappear until the trial's over. DeSantis eventually faced felony charges of fleeing to avoid testifying. Mousie was good with that. It's a whole lot better than the alternative. His son may be a little slow, but at least he's alive. A few other noteworthy details came out about Frankie Jr. during his trial. A few character witnesses talked about his shenanigans around Bridgeport. Caruso once beat a woman with a baseball bat over a parking spot while screaming, "Don't you know I'm syndicate? These are our streets." In another incident, social workers once brought black kids to a pool located in a gym where Frankie and his pals hung out. Little Frankie didn't like that too much. Junior organized a mob of white teens who screamed racial slurs at the children and threatened the social workers. After serving a few years in prison for the Clark beating, his father brought Junior into the fold of the outfit since he had few career options left. Junior allegedly became inducted into the family in the late 2000s and is currently a soldier in his father's 26th Street crew. And he currently runs a large bookmaking operation out of Bridgeport. In addition to Rhodey, Lamantia, and Barbara, the Caruso family would add yet another outfit name to their extended family when Frankie married Brittany Zeflarski, daughter of Chicago's video poker king Casey Zeflarski. Interestingly, Casey almost missed the opportunity to walk his daughter down the aisle because he was on house arrest sporting an ankle monitor following a gambling pinch. Fortunately for him, the judge must have been in a good mood that day because he allowed Casey to attend the wedding with a deputy sheriff chaperone under one condition. He is not to utter a single word to the father of the groom, Frank Toots Caruso. The judge imposed a gag order on the mobster and tells him, "If you violate that order, boy, I'll throw you back in jail so fast it'll make your head spin." The diesel fuel that keeps the massive Chinatown crew as a driving force in the Chicago underworld are juice loans. Similar to the Elmwood Park crew, the Chinatown 26th Street crew were loaded with juice loan specialists and relied on them for a large portion of their total revenue. Also like the Elmwood Park crew, the 26th Street crew had several juice loan operations going at once. During the 70s and 80s, they had the South Side on lock. Notable Chinatown 26th Street crew loan sharks. The juice loan king of Chinatown, Frank Calabrese. Frank's got the juice and juice loans coursing through his veins. He was a prolific loan shark, and Frank was slinging juice loans before he was even connected with the outfit. People tend to forget because his mammoth juice loan operation was often overshadowed by all his ruthless murders. Frank Bucchieri. When his brother Fifi Bucchieri died, he reported to Turk Torello. And when Torello died, Frank was kicking up to Angelo. OG Chinatown loan shark Jasper Chapetta. Steve Anarino. Anarino was also an old-school Chinatown loan shark with a massive operation. He also had two brothers operating under the outfit banner. Anthony, who is also in the Chinatown crew and helps him out with his juice loan operation. And Sam, who's a heavyweight in the Chicago Heights crew under Jimmy the Bomber Couture. Interestingly, in a conversation between Frank Sr. and Jr. that was picked up on a wiretap when they were both locked up together, you can hear Sr. telling Jr. about the time Steve Anarino and Angelo LaPietro had a falling out, and Angelo wanted to toss him out of the crew, so he stabbed him in the chest. I guess when some mobsters are at a loss for words, they grab a knife. Apparently it was only a flesh wound, but Anarino got the point and took off. Joe Lombardi, not to be confused with Joe Lombardo. Then we have Jimmy Cordovano, Anthony Polio de Rosa, Vito Spallone, Sam Gallo, and our little buddy Jimmy DeForte. After whacking out the pallet guy, DeForte decided to get involved in the safer side of organized crime, the side that reduces the chance of incarceration, labor racketeering. So even little poker DeForte got involved in the union shenanigans. And it turned out he loved it. I'm sure he thought to himself, dang, I should have gotten into this much sooner. He was a business agent for Local 1002 and 1006. He was a delegate and the coordinator of committees to the Chicago District Council. Johnny Apes was impressed with how DeForte was dealing with the unions, so he sent him over to Chicago Heights so he could infiltrate unions over there. Apparently those Heights guys were too worried about chop shops and going too easy on the unions. The maneuver paid off for Monteleone. Jimmy was able to get in there and became Secretary-Treasurer for International Labor's Union Local 5 in Chicago Heights. Of course, all that union fun couldn't last forever, and it didn't. As the mob dominated the labor's union nationwide into the mid-1990s, the Justice Department finally agreed to let them clean house. The union hired private investigators to weed out crime and corruption. In 1997, the Laborers International Union went after the powerful Chicago District Council, filing a 122-page complaint citing strong ties to organized crime by prominent members. The complaint declares that a strong mob presence in the CDC has been perpetrated. Members and/or associates of Chicago LCN have been able to manipulate union affairs and exert control and exercise influence over the affairs of the Chicago district. For decades, the participation of these guys had resulted in a breakdown of democratic practices within the Chicago Council. The complaint ordered the removal of 3 men whose family held sway over Chicago's nearly 20,000 members for over a decade. Of course, we know who they're referring to, them Caruso boys. After prompting from federal prosecutors and reformers in the union leaders removed them from their locals. Officials determined that the evidence showed that the mob has influenced the union for more than 3 decades. The decision permanently revoked the memberships of Bruno, Leo, and Frank Caruso, who controlled locals 1006 and 1001. Also included in the union purge was Jimmy DeForte, who held sway over locals 5 and 1002. Prosecutors would also make sure to file criminal charges against the gangsters related to the union corruption. Once booted from his cushy union gig, DeForte got into the horse racing business, fixing races. He seemed to have gotten away with that murder. By now it was nothing more than an afterthought. Well, of course, when it comes to murders, they could come around and bite you in the ass many years later, and that's what happened to DeForte. In addition to running gambling rackets, handing out juice loans, and killing people, Jimmy Poker also ran a burglary crew. One of his burglary buddies would take an unrelated pinch, and to get himself out of a jam, he decided to tell detectives about a certain murder he's aware of, and implicated DeForte in the Pallet Man murder. Jimmy was subsequently indicted for the murder, but in a situation reminiscent to Saladino, DeForte would die in June of 2000 while out on bond. Before his case went to trial, he was only 55. The Chinatown 26th Street crew would go through a transformation around the turn of the century. As its leaders lost their previous jobs in unions and government, law enforcement officials said the 26th Street crew has become a lot less visible, though still highly operational. The crew, along with most of their outfit counterparts, have become more sophisticated, got involved with more white-collar crimes, investing in legitimate businesses and curbing their violent impulses. They're definitely nothing like they once were, and that also goes for their headquarters as well, the Italian American Social Club. As the crew seemed to be dwindling down in size, the club went heavy the other direction and mushroomed in size. The club has broadened its membership since it was founded in 1981 by the legendary crew capo Angelo the Hook LaPietra. Members now include doctors and lawyers and people from different ethnic backgrounds. LaPietra was released from prison in 1997, and after his release, he was presented with a plaque and award for his leadership and commitment to the community. It recognized him as a quote-unquote decision maker. LaPietra is also the chairman of the board of the neighborhood Italian American Club. He managed to stay alive for a couple years after his release from prison, but died in 1999 of natural causes. The death of Angelo marked the end of an era in the Chinatown Bridgeport area that was clearly evident whenever one would visit the Italian American Social Club, the crew's old headquarters. Gone are the days when the club was the nerve center for the Southside outfit crew, when most days you'd see Angelo posted up and back with what seemed like a conveyor belt of guys lined up waiting to hand him an envelope and kiss the ring. Nowadays, the Southside Club has over 500 members, many of whom gather on weekdays to shoot pool, watch TV, and break balls. And the club has definitely expanded its reach in the community. The club has sponsored youth baseball teams, hosted anti-drug seminars for kids, and held civic events. It's opened its doors to church functions and school graduations. It's hosted breakfast with Santa and huge 4th of July parties. Apparently, some reputed mom figures still hang out at the club, but they don't run the place like they once did. And when the White Sox are playing, you can count on the big screen TV blaring. Sox Park is just a few blocks south of the club, a red brick building at 30th and Shields. A big improvement over its former home in a Chinatown storefront. As one member put it started out as a storefront. We'd play cards and sit around. Now it's the Taj Mahal with dudes and a workout room. I'm sure it's nothing like it once was, but I'm also sure mob dealings are still going on there behind closed doors. Mainly because the president of the Italian American Social Club is a mobster. Now a wise old-timer in the Chinatown crew, Captain D. DeFazio is now the man in charge. He's the president of the social club and largely responsible for its expansion. When questioned about his mob ties, DeFazio admitted he was involved in illegal gambling, but that was years ago. Unfortunately for Captain D, he was brought up during the family secrets trial. It came out that DeFazio and Frank Calabrese Sr. had no-show jobs at Connie's Pizza of all places. DeFazio also acted as a go-between, running extortion payments from the pizza joint to Frankie Breeze. Frank Sr. himself became a crew leader and a powerhouse on the South Side. Unfortunately for Frank, his organized crime journey came to a tragic end in what can only be described as a nightmare for Frank, as the unfolding events would not only mark the end for him, but some say mark the end for the outfit as we know it. Now, the outfit certainly isn't dead, but they are definitely neutered, a hollow shell of what they once were. Their demise stemmed from all the self-purging they've been doing. Some trace it back to the Spilotro hit and some to the Fecurata hit. In either case, it was the outfit killing its own, because they wouldn't have wanted to kill Fecurata if they didn't have to bury the Spilotro brothers. It's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Whatever the case, it would be the Fecurata slaying that set off a chain of events that eventually resulted in the landmark Operation Family Secrets case that charged 14 Windy City wise guys with 18 gangland homicides in the mid-2000s, and wound up taking down a number of key outfit heavyweights. And as most of us all know, half of the entire upper echelon of the outfit were there and directly involved in the Spilotro hit. For some reason, the bosses wanted a couple of guys from each crew there in the basement. I suppose he did that to make everybody culpable for the crime so no one rats, but all he did is put more people at risk if somebody ever does. Just ask Marcelo what he thinks about it. Both Fecarata and Nick Calabrese took part in the high-profile grisly double homicide of rambunctious outfit lieutenant Tony the Ant Spilotro and his brother Michael. Nick was part of a hit team that beat, stomped, and strangled their victims to death in the basement of a suburban Chicago home, while Fecarata was tasked with arranging a disposal squad for the Spilotro bodies afterward, along with Chicago Heights Captain Al Tocco and a couple guys from his crew. Well, it seems like these guys half-assed the job because outfit bosses were incensed when the brothers' bodies were discovered in a shallow grave less than 10 days later by a farmer. This created problems for everyone involved, problems solely blamed on the botched burial job. Poor El Tocco, he had a bad night. He ended up getting stranded by his men in the midst of digging the hole in northwest Indiana and had to get picked up by his wife, who would end up testifying against him at his future trial. And Tocco knew the bosses were pissed. He knew what time it was, so he took off. He didn't wait around to get killed. He hightailed it out of the country and hid out in Greece. Fortunately for Tocco, he was a great earner and he was well liked by his cohorts, and he doesn't have a track record for screwing up. So word eventually came down that Ferriola forgave him and he was allowed to come back. Fecarata, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. He was already on thin ice with outfit brass for past indiscretions such as bringing his hairdresser girlfriend with him on muscle jobs and murder scouting assignments. Plus, a suspicion has been permeating that he could possibly be skimming gambling and loan sharking proceeds that he was responsible for collecting, according to Chicago Crime Commission documents. So Fecarata's stock was on a steady decline at this point. Then Nick said one of Frank's loan sharking customers raised a complaint about John. The guy said he was getting raked over the coals by Fecarata. The man complained that he was being forced to pay off a high-interest juice loan owed by a former business partner of Frank's, while at the same time paying off the mortgage on Fecarata's house, which is something Frank and them weren't aware of. So that complaint triggered a sit-down involving the Calabrese brothers, Jimmy LaPietra, and Johnny Apes and Monteleone. Nick said it was at that sit-down when it was decided to kill Fecarata, a member of their own 26th Street Chinatown crew. So that burial fiasco turned out to be the final straw for Big John Fecarata. A hit was thereby put on his head, and the Calabrese brothers were given the murder contract. So they came up with a ruse and told John that they were going to bomb an office of a local dentist that owed him money. They got a few flares and wrapped them together to make it look like dynamite and stuck them in a bag next to a pistol hidden at the bottom. Nick and John were to drive together in one car and Frank was to follow in another. Now, what's kind of interesting here is Frank Sr. was going to put Frank Jr. on this hit as well. He was to sit in the back seat of the car and be Nick's backup in case he needed any. Recalling the story, Jr. said he was ready to murder for his dad. He said you always need two guys in a car on a hit, and he got in the back seat and was to go with his uncle. And this was a pivotal moment for Frank Jr. If he crossed that line, there would be no turning back. He'd be swimming in the deep end of the pool. But it was actually Nick who talked him out of it. He told him, "This ain't for you, kid. You don't want this life." And Junior seemingly didn't know what he wanted, but he took his advice and hopped out of the car. And something tells me deep down he didn't want to go, and once Nick gave him that out, he jumped at it. So Nick went on this one solo, which in hindsight was an awful idea. So with Frank following, Nick picked up Fecarata and on they went to the dentist's office. So here you go, it was game time. In the parking lot, Nick reached in the bag containing the fake bomb and pretended to light the fuse, but instead he grabbed the pistol and quickly pulled it out and turned to shoot Fecarata at close range. But John was an experienced hitman and quickly got wise to the situation and grabbed the gun, and the pair began to tussle. Then in the ensuing struggle, Nick somehow shot himself in the arm. Fecarata then bolts from the stolen Buick across Belmont Avenue, hoping to take refuge inside Brown's banquet hall, which was hosting a weekly bingo night. Nick panicked because he knew if John got away, it would be his ass shot and tossed in the trunk of a car. So Nicky Slim sprinted after him, and just before John enters the bingo hall, with his life on the line, he steadies his hand and lines up to take the shot of his life, and he manages to shoot him in the back of the head in the banquet hall foyer right in front of a handful of stunned witnesses. He ran up to Fecarata, who was laying on the ground, and delivered one more shot to the dome to make sure he's dead before he heads to the getaway car driven by his brother back at the dentist's office parking lot, and the pair left the scene. A moment of relief set in for Nick. Even though things got hairy there for a moment, he got his guy and the contract had been satisfied. Although what didn't seem like much of a big deal then, but will be a couple decades later, was all the blood leaking from his gunshot wound. Plus, during the melee, Dum Dum dropped one of his gloves. With no leads or DNA technology back then, the case went cold and Nick believed he got away with yet another murder. The crazy thing is, the feds would have never known to check the glove against Nick's DNA if it wasn't for Junior. He's really the source of the outfit's demise. Frank Sr. didn't get his two oldest sons, Frank Jr. and Kurt, involved in mob activities until they were about 19 years old. They started with collecting money from peep shows and loan sharking customers and graduated into keeping the books for Frank's loan sharking operation. Frank was slowly teaching them the ropes of a Chicago wise guy. He encouraged his boys to always keep a low profile. They were taught to blend in and fly under the radar. Junior said his father always told him to drive Ford and Chevys, not Cadillacs and BMWs, and wear baseball caps, not fedoras, and jackets over trench coats. He was shown by his father how to hug someone to see if they're carrying a gun or wearing a wire. And Junior said when he was young, his dad was a normal, loving father. But as he became increasingly under the influence of the murderous Angelo LaPietra, he changed, growing colder and more brutal towards his sons. He said his temper would be shorter and he'd be quicker with his hands and more controlling. Younger Calabrese came to see how manipulative his father was, switching personalities at the drop of a hat. As Junior became more central to his father's racketeering and gambling concerns, the more he tried to wiggle out of his father's grip. Calabrese tried opening his own businesses. He opened Italian restaurants and began dealing cocaine, which was a no-no in Chicago. He kept that hidden from his father, knowing that if he found out, he would probably kill him. Well, Junior was no El Chapo. He immediately broke the golden rule, don't get high off your own supply. So another secret he also kept from his dad was his own intensifying addiction to the drug. Now a drug addict, Calabrese began stealing from his dad to keep his habit fed. Senior had about $1 million stashed in the walls of his mother's basement. Junior found that money and started stealing from it. He was using that money to finance his habit, and he made a series of poor business investments. Yeah, not a good idea. Drugs will make you do stupid things. His father would eventually discover the losses, and when he did and who was responsible, he issued a decree. From now on, I own you, he told his son. The restaurants are mine, your house is mine, everything is mine. Now, the outfit's demise would be laced with a bit of irony, because how important the Chinatown 26th Street crew was to the outfit, it would be that crew which would implode, crippling the outfit so it's no longer a formidable criminal organization. And the source of the destruction was definitely a family affair. In 1995, Frank Sr., his two sons, Frank Jr. and Kurt, and Uncle Nick were all pinched on a federal loan sharking indictment, and all four pleaded guilty to their roles in the family business. When Frank was subsequently sentenced to 10 years in that case, he told the judge, "All I want to do is get my family back together." Little did he know they were running the other direction. Frank would never get his family back together because they all turned on him. At the time, he had no idea how bad it was or it would get. Frank Sr. and Jr. were both sent to the same federal prison in Milan, Michigan. And Frank was actually doing alright in prison. It was business as usual. Frank's loan sharking business was still running strong. His top lieutenant at the time was outfit soldier Nick Ferriola, son of former boss Joe Ferriola. Nick would keep him informed of what's going on in the streets, deliver messages to crew associates, collect extortion and juice loan payments, and whatever else Frank told him to do, on top of operating his own sports bookmaking business. Plus, as I mentioned earlier, Frank had two dirty cops working for him at the time as well, feeding him information and passing along messages. So in Frank's mind, things in prison are about as good as they're gonna get. If only he knew the thoughts permeating in his kid's head. Being under his father's control due to his thievery, Frank Jr. felt he had no way out, so he decided to do the unthinkable. He decided to flip and tell the feds everything he knows about his father, his uncle, and everyone else he knew anything about. In the summer of 1998, Frank Jr. wrote a letter to the FBI to offer his cooperation in building a murder case against his father. Now, Frank Jr. likes to push the narrative that he had no other option to get out from under his father's control except for ratting or killing him. In his letter, he stated that he wants to help them keep this sick man in jail forever, like he's doing society a favor, when his decision was clearly based on his own selfish, greedy motivations. Driven by his drug addiction, Jr. would end up stealing every penny Sr. had stashed away in Grandma's wall when he got out. All $700,000 of it, and he moved away. And he knew the only way he'd get away with doing something like that is if his dad was locked up. Funny how he never mentions any of this in his interviews. He's always the victim. Junior was so hyper-focused on getting his dad a life sentence, he had no regard for who he had to take down in the process. They were all collateral damage. During his initial conversation with the feds, he told them what he knew about the Big John Fecarata murder, which would lead to the agents paying Nick a visit and getting a sample of his DNA to compare with the blood spatter left at the Fecarata scene, as well as the glove that was dropped. Frank Jr. was determined to stick his old man with a life sentence, so he even offered to wear a wire. Knowing the risks involved, the feds were all for it and wrapped his torso with recording equipment like a Christmas tree. Frank would spend his days warming up to Pop and trying to lead him into incriminating conversations, specifically murders, and it wasn't too hard. Apparently, Frank liked to reminisce and boast about his past criminal exploits to his son, although the entire investigation almost came to a screeching halt one afternoon in the prison yard. You see, all this happened to coincide with a jailhouse tattoo Junior got on his chest, and Junior was walking around the prison exercise yard when suddenly his old man stopped and asked to see his new tattoo. "Why are you covering it up? Let me see it," he said. Of course, that would have been an instant death sentence. If Calabrese lifted up his shirt and revealed the wire, the old man, who was shorter than him but immensely powerful, would have known he had been betrayed and would have killed him on the spot with his bare hands. Calabrese, with really no other choice, decided to stand his ground and bluff him. He pulled his shirt down and refused and said it would get him in trouble. The old man looked puzzled for a second, then relaxed and backed off. Yeah, I'm sure that was a huge relief for Junior. Should Calabrese have been exposed at that moment as an FBI informant, it would have put an end to the largest mafia investigation in American history. As it was, he went on to hold many more hours of taped conversations detailing several murders with the older mobster that helped blow apart the entire Chicago mob. The FBI has been leaning heavy on Nick for years now. Being an experienced and committed mafioso, Nick always resisted the FBI's advances and offers, remaining loyal and honoring his oath. That's not to say he didn't make everyone nervous, though. During this time, Frank and the rest of the upper echelon of the outfit were extremely worried about cooperators. They were doing everything they could to prevent guys from flipping and to find out as soon as possible if anyone does. And of course, Frank has his dirty cops keeping their eyes peeled and their ears open. But Nick in particular has got everyone on edge because he's never served a significant bit in prison. In an attempt to keep him holding strong with his mouth shut, Jimmy Marcello, who was running the entire outfit at the time, was giving Nick's wife $4,000 a month to basically buy his silence. Things are a bit different now. The feds are holding all the cards. Now armed with the DNA match on both the blood and the gloves, the feds increase the pressure, especially about Jimmy's role in the Spilatro murders. Interestingly, the outfit even sent a message to Frank Sr.'s other son, Kurt. He arrived at his home in the plush Chicago suburb of Kenilworth to find a plastic bag on his doorstep containing what he thought was a bomb. Kurt freaks out and calls the cops, only to find out it was a fake. They put items in the bag wrapped up that resembled sticks of dynamite. They were just trying to scare him. Now, I don't know if it was because of the fake bomb, but Kurt never cooperated, to my knowledge. Anyway, Nick was the one they were losing sleep over. So far, he's holding strong, but he's definitely feeling that noose tightening. The feds felt they have him on the ropes, and they have one more move to play. The feds came to Nick with a recording they claim was Frank signing off on his murder. They were leading him to believe that Frank wanted him dead, but in reality, Frank was saying if Nick was helping investigators, he would have no objection to his brother being killed. Which I believe is an important stipulation, because these guys are mobsters, so that kind of goes without saying. If either of them were to cooperate, the other would have to accept that their brother's decision led to his murder. On the recording, Frank even followed that up by saying that this is the life that he and his brother had chosen. To me, that's very different than saying Frank wants you dead and he's got a hit out on you. These agents were sneaky. They tried to manipulate Nick, and it worked. That was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. Nick faithfully served his brother and was loyal to him his entire life, so this kind of perceived betrayal pushed him over the edge, sending him on over to join Team USA. And that was pretty much checkmate for the outfit. The FBI called their investigation Operation Family Secrets. The 2007 trial lasted 3 months and cleared 18 unsolved gangland homicides going all the way back from 1970 to 1986. The Chicago outfit was so game tight, the FBI was able to significantly penetrate them only 3 times in their over 100-year existence. The Hollywood extortion case in the 1940s, the casino skimming case in the mid-80s, and this. And Junior was ultimately successful in getting his old man that life sentence. In addition to that, the judge made sure to hit Frank's pockets hard. It wasn't that long ago Frank was flush with cash, working with millions. Then things started going downhill fast. Before the indictments, Nick said Frank misplaced more than $400,000 by simply losing track of a safety deposit box. He lost another $250,000 when the brothers buried $250,000 in cash in a steel box in Wisconsin. But after digging it up later, the money was wet, mildewed, and smelly. "We tried to use cologne," Calabrese testified. "It made the smell worse." Then, of course, Junior took off with that 700 grand. And then after the trial, Calabrese and 3 others convicted in the case were ordered to pay more than $24 million in fines and restitution to the families of their victims. And interestingly, part of Calabrese's debt was paid in March of the following year when FBI agents executed a search warrant at Calabrese's former Oakbrook home and discovered a secret compartment in the wall behind a framed collection of family photographs. Envelopes in the compartment were found to contain $728,000 in cash. The compartment also held 1,000 pieces of jewelry, many still in the display boxes with price tags still attached, and 7 firearms. The case also sent then acting boss Jimmy the Man Marcello and consigliere Joey the Clown Lombardo to prison for the rest of their lives. There were a total of 18 charged in the case, and long prison sentences were handed out to 7 other outfit heavyweights. It was an extraordinary result given the history of the Chicago mob. In the last 100 years, the outfit has committed more than 3,000 murders, yet before this trial, only 12 convictions have been secured. And until the 2 Calabrese turncoats took the stand, not a single made member has ever been held accountable. It's hard to believe all it took was 2 stoolies to inflict that much damage to one of the strongest mafia organizations in the country. That just goes to show you that these guys have got to be more careful with who they nominate to be one of their go-to killers. Because if you're gonna put that much work onto one guy's plate, you better be damn sure he'll never cooperate. So really the bosses need to take some of the blame here as well. Because if you're putting all these murders onto one man and that man flips, he could do more damage than 10 wise guys. If one guy knows where all the bodies are buried, you're essentially giving that one man the power to take down an entire organization. And that's exactly what happened here. They were correct in utilizing Frank Sr. that way. They made the mistake in thinking proximity or familial relations will somehow make one man's values reflect onto another. It also highlights how high the stakes are when you're in the life. The wrong judgment of one guy could lead to total destruction. Now the outfit seems like it's on life support, limping around the Chicago criminal landscape as a shadow of its former self. Nevertheless, they had a hell of a run, and the exploits of the Chinatown 26th Street crew are forever etched in the annals of organized crime in this country. Thanks for watching, y'all. Don't forget to subscribe.